Gorilla Pods are the most annoying thing ever created. So what are we talking about today? Well, we're continuing this conversation around the FX6. I don't talk about cameras a whole lot or do dedicated videos, but this camera kind of took a lot of us off guard, especially me. I used to own a SONY FX6, which is the predecessor to the FX6, and that camera was garbage, so the expectations were low for the FX6, and as I mentioned in my last video, blew us away. So I shoot a lot on the FX9, and the question I keep getting is, how does this compare to the FX6? So today's video, I'm going to talk a bit about what the FX6 footage is like. Is it as hyped up or overhyped as people are talking about? Everyone's asking, you know, is it like the Red Komodo? I don't know yet. I've shot on the Red Komodo, but I haven't done a side-by-side. But what I can tell you is a bit about how it compares to something like the FX9, its older brother. Now, we brought the FX9 on set for our shoot, and we were going to do side-by-side comparisons, but we just had too much fun with the FX6 that we never got around to it. Also too, if you want to try some FX6 footage for yourself, I've put a download link below for this clip. I put the original MXF file straight out of camera. Nothing's been applied to it, so you can see for yourself how the FX6 footage is. Also too, if you want to try some LUTs on it, I've just put out a new LUT pack below. You're seeing this color right now is the FX6 footage. And if you're curious what FX9 footage is like, also I've thrown one of my clips up there too. There is no compression or anything. This is what came straight out of camera. So to do this test, I've spent the entire afternoon zooming in on all the FX9 footage I've ever shot and looking at my FX6 footage that we shot a week ago, really trying to break down these two cameras, trying to understand, looking at the same IRE levels, like same exposure, and seeing if one's more noisy than the other or if one has more detail. So everything in this video today is coming from those findings. I've been shooting on the FX9 for about a year, so I really feel like I know that footage. We shot a couple films on it already, including Clear Sky and Untitled, which hopefully we'll be releasing one of those films soon. But I have done some shoots recently, actually with Callie, our amazing, talented ballerina in this piece. I shot with her a week ago before the FX6 on my FX9, funny enough. And so I had the chance to actually see the same person on camera with both cameras. Now, these are different situations, so this is not a scientific test. I know people are probably gonna get both cameras up in a lab. That stuff's all really cool. What I like to do with my tests is get it out in the real world, get it out in the field, because I never shoot tests for my work, I shoot the real world. So I wanna know, how does this camera work? And so let's talk about FX6 footage and is it living up to the hype? Now, the first thing that I always talk about is dynamic range. How does this compare to the FX9, or how is the FX6 dynamic range? Now, I talked a bit about this in our last video, but why highlights specifically for me are very important is you always know a camera is a cheap mirrorless camera when you see the highlights clipping and blowing out. Now, we were intentionally blowing out these windows in the shoot, but I was able to actually pull back a significant amount of information from the windows considering how bright they are. You can see in this shot here, as I pull the highlights down, there isn't much other detail in there because it was just sky, but what's cool is that you can actually get the red back from this truck. Often when things clip or when they're too crushed, you lose the color in them, and this was pretty impressive being able to pull that red back. So I would say this is good points for the FX6. I actually haven't found a difference yet with all the footage I worked on pulling back information from the FX9 footage in the sky to when I tried it with the FX6. It seems like they're a pretty close tie in this place. Now, the area that the two cameras begin to separate ever so slightly, because I'm really impressed with how close the footage is between these two cameras, is detail. This is where the cameras begin to get a bit different. And I think the reason for this is because the FX9 is a 6K sensor being downsampled to 4K. And when this happens, you're always gonna get better detail because that 6K sensor is pulling, I don't know what the math is, but a lot more information out of skin and hair and all those little details that go into making an image pop or showing more texture in that image. So I found the FX9 just ever so slightly more detailed. I'm talking minuscule, but still when you zoom in on the FX6 or you look at some of these shots with Cali skin, you can see the skin pores. The thing, when you zoom in, you can still see there's detail in the skin. Now, I can't stress enough about how important detail is, because when your skin tones don't have detail, they become that like pastel-y look, like when you used to shoot on a 5D, like the Mark II, like I had, or I think I had the Mark III actually. Sometimes the skin tones just became this like peachy, all bland orange color, and you lose detail in people's face. And this is so important in films because your characters are human. The skin is what makes them human, and you need that detail to help people look their best in your films. And by the way, all the LUTs that you're seeing on this footage are my new LUT pack that I'm actually selling. It is live right now. I've never sold LUTs before, but I decided to finally do it. I'll do another video kind of doing a deep dive into color talking about this, but you can go to the link below and check them out. These are the LUTs that I actually use on all my footage. These are the LUTs that I have in my software. I've been developing and working on them for over 10 years now. I put it on all my films. No Country is an Island, we used all my LUTs on that. Also too, the new upcoming film, which we still don't have a title for, Untitled, you'll see all of these shots are with my LUTs that are part of this package, so you can go check it out. These are premium cinema LUTs that I love to use, so I'm happy to bring them across to you guys, and they work on any kind of log footage. I designed some for Canon, some for just general log cameras, but there's some really amazing ones too for Sony, so if you're a Sony shooter, you'll want to check these out. So go check that link below. I have them on sale just for this week. The sale will end by the end of the Black Friday week, or whatever we're calling it now. I'm sure it'll become Black Friday month soon enough, but go check those out. But speaking of color, I wanted to talk about the color science in the FX6. Now, I haven't seen much of a difference. It's gonna sound like the repetition of this video, but when I tried to push the FX6, the only difference I noticed with it compared to the FX9 is that sometimes the skin tones began to get a bit more orangey quicker on the FX6 than they did the FX9. Now, I don't know if this is scientifically repeatable. It's just the footage that I worked on. I found that the people, when I pushed the saturation, they got oranger quicker. But this is the cool thing about Sony color science, is you really can push the saturation before people look crazy. I sometimes in shots, I push it all the way to 200% before you start seeing things looking a bit crazy or people turning into Oompa Loompas. It's really impressive how far you can push it. And this is what I love about the Sony codec these days, is just how robust it feels. And I found when I've been shooting on the C500 as well recently, it kind of is the same thing. But sometimes with the Canon, I find if I'm pushing the saturation, the skin starts popping a bit. And I think this is because Canon's color science is geared towards skin tone looking good right away, no matter what LUT you put on it. But I find though, is when you start pushing saturation or start doing some other things with your S-curves, people can start looking like Oompa Loompas real quick. But that said, I found it pretty indistinguishable between the color science. Now, the more research I've done about these two cameras, the more I realize that it's not a true dual base native ISO in the FX6. They just call it dual ISO. So I guess you could write down in the comments if you know more about this than me. They're just pushing the signal in the second ISO, but that doesn't make sense that you would call it a second ISO. I just know this, that 12,800 ISO is still very, 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 very clean. If you properly expose with this, there is hardly any noise on the image. The only time you're gonna get noise is when you start exposing skin below kind of 40 IRE, but overall, it's a pretty clean image. I did have to say I found the FX9 a bit cleaner at 800, but I'm talking like I had to zoom in and really pick apart these images to find things wrong with them. If you're looking at it at a glance, out of the box, you're not gonna be able to tell much between the two cameras. They're very, very, very similar. Now, I know this is not a great comparison necessarily because we're in two different environments. What I've done is looked at shots where the exposure is similar on skin tones or in the shadows and made sure that the noise to signal ratio is similar. I find the 4000 on the FX9 gets a bit noisy if you're not pumping enough light into it. I get a bit cheeky with the 800 where I'll underexpose because I like dark, moody images and I find it doesn't get noisy. But at 4000, I really have to push the light into it for the footage to kind of calm down. It's a bit more cranky, that 4000 on the FX9. Now, talking about the cameras physically, What I do like about the FX9 is how heavy it is. Now you might think this is a bit strange, but why I like heavy cameras is in the case of this shot, I can run handheld with the camera and you don't get that crazy drunken sailor vibe where the footage is twisting and turning with every step you take because it is so heavy, it stays level. Now it's not heavy like an Alexa or a Sony Venice where you're gonna be really burning out your back within 10 minutes of shooting. But I find it kind of a perfect heaviness where it's just heavy enough that it's not gonna get those vibrations, but it's not too heavy for me to get exhausted from shooting for an entire day. But the FX6 is a really nice weight, I found. Once I start adding a bit of my gear to it, I almost started preferring that weight than the FX9. But at the end of the day, me and Maddie looked at each other after filming all day. We both realized how still fresh we felt. And this was because the camera body is so light. So I like that form factor. I do hate the top handle and I hate that the XLR goes into the top handle. It just makes it feel like a bit like one of those prosumer JVC style cameras. I don't know. It's not my vibe. It feels coming plasticky. I like to have a bit more robust of a top handle. That's why I've gone for the wooden camera handle on my FX9. I just like stuff a bit more, I don't know, brutish than what Sony's providing there. It kind of feels like a handy cam at that point, which it's a small gripe. If I had my choice, I would take that off and just put on a little handle. But the problem with that is then you don't get your XLR in. So I don't know. I'd probably end up leaving it on now that I think about it. One other cool thing with the FX6 is its monitor. Now I'm gonna tear apart monitors in a sec, but one real cool thing was its sun hood, how it popped up and folded back in. What I have to do when I'm shooting with my small HD, I have to use this stupid scuba rubber hood here. It's like made out of like scuba material. This thing is so annoying. It breaks all the time. I've had to like glue it a whole bunch. I hate the sun hoods. I think Small HD has improved them on their latest ones, but this sun hood on the FX6 was the coolest thing that I've ever used in terms of a sun hood. But when it came to the monitor, again, I just hate the monitors that these companies deliver. The only person who's ever delivered a good monitor with a camera, I would actually say is Red Camera, but Arri Alexa, Canon, and Sony, and everyone else, their little LCDs that they include with the camera are garbage. I hate them. I know they're not garbage, I'm being a bit facetious, but compared to something like a Small HD, and I'm not sponsored by them, I just hate using them. So the first thing I'll do whenever I get one of these cameras is I take off the monitor. I tried it for 10 minutes that day when we were filming with Callie, and I just got sick of that monitor right away. I just didn't like it. It's too tiny, and you wanna know if you're in focus, you have to have that annoying red glow around everything. It's annoying, where if I'll just turn up the peaking a bit on a Small HD, I know exactly where my focus is. It's bigger, I can throw my LUTs on it easier. You don't have to go through the Sony menu system, which is a bit like navigating the first Zelda when you're in the layers of just confusion and titles. But this is much easier, so I'll always use a Small HD, or in the case I have my BM5. Just prefer a bit bigger of a monitor. I wanna know on set what my final image is gonna be looking like when I take it into post-production. So I put all my LUTs, and that's what you can do actually with the LUTs I'm selling right now, is I put them all on my monitor, just on a little SD card in there. Then you have everything that you're gonna already be putting on in Adobe Premiere, just right there. And, oh, and by the way, a lot of people have been asking about my setup here because it's different. I used to always sit at that desk. So why don't I give you guys just 30 seconds right now to talk about what I have. So here we go, here is my YouTuber setup. I have a Godot light, the little mini octo box here that I use as my main key light. It's set to daylight, but I changed the white balance on my camera so it feels a bit warmer. Then I set up this little pedestal for my mic, and then I have my Sony on a GorillaPod, and I'm using my Portkeys BM5. Then in the background, I just throw on my Falcon Eyes F7 lights on the ground here, set them to the same color temperature. And then I throw a couple lamps up, and that's my easy YouTube setup. Nothing that special, but it works for me. So there you go, guys. That's kind of my least scientific camera test I could ever give you. Right now, I'm just giving you my opinion because I spent all afternoon looking at this footage, zooming in on it, and trying to figure out how does it differ than my FX9? How does this FX6 actually hold up? Is it as good as we all were hyping it up last week? And overall, I would say yes. Really have to get nitpicky for me to find things that I don't like about the image. Now, the biggest issue with the FX6 footage is the aliasing at high speeds, 180, 240. It starts to get a bit muddy, a bit blurry. You start getting some aliasing in the high contrast areas. It's not the prettiest image, but it's definitely usable. It's not something that I would be afraid to throw in my film, but is it the most pristine, clean thing? No. But is it still awesome? Yes. But there you go, guys. That is the FX6. Don't forget to go check out my LUTs. They're only on sale for this week. They'll go fast. Well, they're unlimited. It's a LUT. Everyone can get one. But the sale won't be lasting forever. But if there's any other questions you guys have, leave them below. Let me know your thoughts. And I'll see you guys on the next one.